we're going to jump right on in, and I'm going to introduce Briana Moore. So happy that you're with us today, Briana. It's just a pleasure. We've known each other for a while, and I've appreciated you so much. You're so generous with your knowledge and your work, and I learn something every time I get to participate in your training. Aww. And a little bit about Ms. Moore. She's conducted training and seminars for over 30 years throughout the Bay Area for medical practitioners, community-based organizations, and city and state and federal agencies, specifically in San Francisco, Alameda, Contra Costa, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and San Bernardino counties. Ms. Moore has developed and presented training focused on the nurturing traumatized women and men with physical, emotional, and mental injuries. Nurturing traumatized women. There we go. The training portfolio includes When Compassion Hurts, which we've hosted before. It's a wonderful. Trauma-Informed Systems 101, Healing Circles for Grief and Loss, Medically Fragile Children 0 to 5, Grief and Depression, Codependency 101, Agency Healing, Working with Wounds at Work. Also, as a therapist for young women, Ms. Moore provides direction and guidance to assist them in staying focused on important elements in their life. Thank you so much, Briana, and participants. If you have some more of these trainings that you've heard me describe that you're interested in when you complete your evaluation today, please be sure to put what other kinds of information you'd like to hear from Ms. Moore, and we've got some training spaces happening in the coming year. So thank you so much. I will be moving the slides forward today, so let me know, Briana, as we get started. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so Beth, I'm just gonna say click, and then you'll click. Sometimes you'll go forward a little bit too much, but don't worry about that. We will just adjust it as it goes along. Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that you are able to be here today. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to connect with people while we're in the middle of a catastrophe in this country. A little unprofessional sidebar here. I don't know if you were able to see President Obama at John Lewis's funeral, but he charged up the world that was watching, and it was absolutely fabulous. He gave some direction on what we need to do to move forward. And if you haven't had the opportunity to take a look at that, take a look at that. You'll feel great, I promise you. So Beth already gave you a bio about me. Today's training, we're going to be moving through some areas that might cause you to feel a little activated. That's the word I use now, besides, instead of saying triggered because of all the gun activity and the gun violence, I no longer like that word trigger. And so I will use the word activated. And that means that you are having some feelings inside of you that's causing you a little bit of anxiety, maybe from something that you experienced that you hear me say, or something that I say that made you think about another experience, or something that you project in the future on. So one of the ways that's important is that we only feel stress when we are thinking about the future, or we are worried about the past, or worried about the future. And so if you find you're being triggered or being activated as a result of something that I say, I want you to think about where in your body that activation is coming up, number one, and then think about a resource spot. A resource spot is an area in your body that causes you to feel calm. And so some of my resource spots, when I feel activated, I just do my fingers like that, or I wiggle my toes so that I can bring myself back into this room and back into the place of the here and now. So I want to offer that to you as a tool. And the other thing that I wanted to say about today is that I noticed Leah sent you some pre-questions, some preliminary questions. I sent her a lot of packet information yesterday and resources for you to use with this training. But based on some of the responses I got yesterday, I put some additional information into the training. So you won't have that in the handout, but we'll get that to you after. So let me just acknowledge the elephant in the room. We're experiencing physical distancing. As human beings, we need to be able to touch one another, and that probably won't be happening for a very long time. I also want to apologize again for any technical difficulties that you may witness. I've done this presentation through several different agencies, and sometimes things work perfectly and sometimes it doesn't. So we're just going to hold on to that. The intention of the work here together today is probably bigger than the 2 hours that we'll be together. That said, our goal here is to take a look at some of the challenges you may be experiencing during the current state of affairs in this country. We'll be looking at some pretty tough spaces: racialized trauma, the pandemic, and how do you have some compassion while caring for yourself and others. Let me see, do I have the right one up? Yeah, I do, okay. All right, so that's where we're going. Okay, Beth, you go ahead and click. You wanna go to the next screen. So I don't know, I can't see where you are. Let me see here, go back up to this corner. Okay, so you're in the one that has all the colors on it, Beth?
Yes, effects of trauma, racialized trauma.
Yes.
Stack the covers, what mentally strong people do, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So with the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and all the others, folks are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And racism is a social construct that's woven into the fabric of this country and many places in the world. And when you watch people be brutal to one another, and now that we have live video that the covers are being pulled off and snatched back, and the ugliness and the hatred is revealed for the whole world to see. These traumatic events can cause us to have an experience that has an impact. We're going to look at that pain of racialized trauma, and then some ways you can be informed and aware just what is anti-Blackness work. And many of you have seen or heard or witnessed or experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a mental disorder that can develop after a person is exposed to a traumatic event, like sexual assault, warfare, traffic collisions, child abuse, domestic violence, watching children be placed into cages, you know, things like that. Things that really, really cause you to have some upset and some activation. Some new information that I found out that's not really new is post-traumatic growth. And that's understood as positive psychological changes that will result from traumatic and highly stressful experiences. So if you take a stressful event and then you turn that around and do something positive with that, that's post-traumatic growth. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about a situation that happened with me and why I started doing and conducting and holding these trainings as a result of a traumatic event that I have turned to post-traumatic growth, which I didn't even know it was called that. So we'll explore 10 things that mentally strong people do during a pandemic, and then we'll end with some compassion. Compassion is a lofty word that's tossed about and projected onto other people. We will use compassion to put the focus on each of you. Essential workers, masked, gloved, washed hands with that bottle of Purell hand sanitizer on the ready. I should have took some stock out in Purell. I should have took some stock out in Zoom, Netflix, Instacart, all of those. We would probably all be very rich right now if we thought about that. And then finally, I'm going to share some resources with you and some tips and reading materials and that you could check out at your convenience. So let's just take a look at and see some definitions of trauma. Okay, Beth, you could click. So we're going to look at the hidden impact and the noticeable effects of trauma. Noticeable and hidden effects of trauma. Okay, Beth, you could click, and these are going to all drop down. Just keep clicking until they all fall. Okay, that's the last one there. Okay, so one of the things that's important here is what is trauma? And trauma is an event, an experience, and the effect of that. And how it affects your body and how you'll be overwhelmed, and your body and your brain automatically knows what to do when you're experiencing trauma. But if you continue to experience trauma over and over and over again, what happens is that this chemical in your body called cortisol is secreted. And so cortisol is meant to help you slow down and to relax you and to calm you and to let you know that everything is all right. But too much cortisol in your body affects your organs, and that's what makes you sick. And so that's what leads to the lasting effects. The effect is disintegration and dysregulation. I call it discombobulation. Because what happens is that sometimes when you have a traumatic event, you don't know whether to stand up or sit down or go forward or move back. And there's a great sense of overwhelm and hypervigilance and hyperarousal when you're experiencing trauma. I recently took a test, a 4-hour test for my clinical license, and I didn't pass the test. And when I came out of the building, I was traumatized. And I was born and raised in San Francisco, grew up in Oakland. I used to work in the building at 1000 Broadway where the test was conducted. And I didn't know which way to go when I came out of that building. My rhythm was off. I couldn't figure out how to find the freeway to get home. All I wanted to do was get home. Eventually I did find my way, but I had to stop, slow down, and use some of the tips and techniques that I often help people with. So that's what I mean by disintegration, dysrhythmic, and dysregulation. Okay, click again. Okay, good. So now we're going to talk about the noticeable effects. And those noticeable effects look like this. These are fight or flight noticeable effects. Your pupils dilate, you have tunnel vision. That means you just can't see, you really don't have any bilateral vision. Your vision gets really, your pupils and all that get constricted. And it's kind of like if you ever have a migraine headache and you feel like somebody's watching you and you're constantly surveilling your surroundings, just looking around, trying to make sure that you're safe. Your heartbeat is faster, your breathing becomes more shallow. You might notice increased sweating. And some of the symptoms that recent research has shown is that you have the same symptoms as ADD and ADHD, which is that hypervigilance and hyperarousal. Always looking around, always checking, always scanning the area. You have a tendency to have a dry mouth, and your leg muscles become tense and stronger so that you can move, so that you could flight and you could go. Right? So that's the body knowing exactly what to do when you get into this fight or flight process. Okay, click that. Keep clicking, drop them all down. But what you might not notice, are some of these impacts. So more cortisol release, like I talked about before, that's not really healthy or helpful. Increased pressure and blood sugar while depressing the immune system. And your immune system is this complicated set of nerves that are set up to make sure that your body doesn't become diseased or infected. So when you're in this flight or fight mode and the cortisol is released, then all of your systems are becoming to be a little bit out of balance. And then adrenaline is released to increase the strength for fight or flight. Your brain and body gets ready for action, which prevents your being able to go to sleep. Your liver releases more sugar and glucose, so you might feel a lot lethargic and like difficult to move. Your digestion slows or stops, and your urine production slows or stops. Okay, Beth. It is new. So you're, okay, good. So now, just to close this section, this theory of polyvagal theory was created by a man named Stephen Borges, and he developed this system. You could check it out on YouTube, but my purpose here is to relate to the nervous system in a pandemic. We have a very sophisticated system within our bodies. When we feel safe, you'll notice in that top part there, we're in the flow. Everything is rocking, right? However, that may be safe and not be safe, might be safe for you, but might not be safe for me, or vice versa. So for example, when the pandemic began, I returned from Colombia. I went to Colombia, which is a spot on my bucket list for a long time. And everybody was telling me you shouldn't go. This was March the 12th. Please don't go. Please don't go. You don't know what's going to happen. We have something going on that's really serious here. Well, I'm a spiritual person, and I say, you know what? God ain't brought me this far to drop me on my head, and that pandemic is not going to hurt me. And I'm a descendant of African slaves, and so I have all this in my blood, and so we're not going to be, I mean, I was telling myself all of these stories so that I could justify me getting to Colombia. So we got there, everything was fine, all the vendors were out, all that great music, and people were dancing and singing and kicking it, all the vendors, lots and lots of shopping was available. So I felt happy. I said, see, everybody was wrong. The next day, everything was cool. The next day, we went to see senior salsa dancing, and the whole town was shut down. No vendors on the street, no cars on the street. The senior salsa place was closed down. I looked at the tour guide. She looked at me, and we both said, I think we need to get up out of here. So, you know, when you go to other countries, all you see is CNN. And so all we saw on CNN was the airport and the fear that people were starting to exhibit. And people were at the airport, they couldn't move. They were 10 deep one way, 10 deep the other way. All the lines were crowded. And I was just like, oh my God. And every tool that I've ever known or shared about calming myself down did not work. But we were finally able to get out of there, get on the airplane, get to Panama, get to Miami, get back to San Francisco. And the greatest thing that happened in the whole wide world was me seeing welcome to the United States of America. I was never, ever so grateful to see that sign. And what I realized was that I had been very, very selfish, that people weren't angry with me. They were afraid for me, my son in particular. So when I got back, I was in the house for like 14 days. I had a little meltdown, and I didn't really realize the impact that the pandemic had on me at that time. I'm a Black woman. I'm strong. I'm invincible. I got a super cape, right? And so I started crying. I couldn't stop crying. And then this sense of anxiety took over me. And I said, if this is happening to me, it's happening to other people. How am I going to deal with it? So I started doing some research, started looking and digging and all of that. And I was in that dark place, the last part on that slide, dark, foggy, out of focus, hopeless, helpless, shut down, disconnected. So I stayed inside, and I lived by myself for like 10 to 12 days. And I had to go outside, and everybody had these masks on, and they were moving away from me like I had the cooties, and I was moving away from them like they had the cooties, and there was no contact, no face contact at all. Now, I'm a normally engaging people, smiling and speaking to everybody. I had lost that ability. I felt overly anxious, shaking, heart pumping, and really, really hypervigilant. I was immobilized and feeling very chaotic inside. Just know the 3 levels here are beginning with the bottom with darkness up to chaos, still further up to flow. So when you are in the flow, you are connected, warm, open-hearted, curious, and engaged. However, these days, we mostly hang out in the chaos, not quite the darkness or out of control, but very confrontational and ready to run. And except there's no place safe to run. God, I can't talk today, sorry. And we call this flight, but there's no place to run. You can't, during this particular time, you couldn't get on an airplane, go anywhere. You really weren't feeling pretty good about they didn't know about physical distancing, and people were really just making it up as they went along, and everything was very unpredictable. So when grief is on us, there is a great sense of darkness, the part about the last step there. And so that's what we're doing right now. That's the phase that we're in right now. We're grieving, and we're going to talk a lot about grief as we go along. but we're grieving the freedom to pick up the phone and call somebody, hey, let's go get a drink, or let's go get something to eat, or meet me in the park and let's take a walk, or, you know, let's go get some Ethiopian food. My friend, I used to call her to, let's go grab some sushi. My favorite sushi bar is closed down and they're not doing anything through DoorDash at all. So that's really, really very, very difficult for me these days. So I want to take a moment here to kind of assess, and I want you should have a pencil. I'm gonna come back here. You should have a pencil and a piece of paper there. There's gonna be a couple of things you're gonna do as we move along. And I just want you, I'm gonna ask you these questions. And what I would like for you to do is to just put a little tick. You know how you go tick, 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 cross? So every time I say something that fits you, just put a little tick. Does that make sense? Can you nod at me? All right, good job. Okay, so as the coronavirus or COVID-19 continues to spread in the United States, anxiety and apprehension are spreading as well. The ability to cope with overwhelming thoughts and feelings can be increasingly difficult during times of uncertainty. It makes sense that you feel extreme stress during these days, but it also activates many mental health problems, even ones you think you might have conquered. This checklist will help you determine where your concerns are and where you're being activated in terms of your emotional stress. Okay, so here we go. Number 1, I have increased frequency and or intensity of my alcohol, mood-altering substances, or illegal substance use. Just put a tick if it's so, and if not, don't worry about it. The next one, I am taking more than my prescribed dosage of medication for anxiety and depression. The next one, I am sleeping significantly more or less than usual. I am eating significantly more or less than usual. I am unable to concentrate or pay attention at work or when doing specific tasks at home. I feel more worried or anxious or depressed than usual. I feel overwhelmed and hopeless. I feel alone and isolated. I am argumentative or confrontational with my friends and families. I have increased my self-injury activities, for example, cutting or burning myself. My craving for alcohol, drugs, food, and other addictions have increased significantly. I have stopped attending to my personal hygiene. That means you only get dressed when you got a Zoom call. I am spending a significant amount of time reading or watching the news. I am engaging in risky behaviors, substance abuse, unsafe sex, etc. I am no longer experiencing pleasure from activities that I always enjoy. I am considering suicide or seriously harming myself. Now, if you checked any of these statements, your mental health might be impacted by fear and anxiety related to the coronavirus pandemic. There are plenty of online resources. What I would like you to do now is in the chat room, please feel free to share anything that you've done making dealing with these issues a little bit easier. Also, if you have any resources that you have discovered, also share that in the chat. You can also mail me if you think you have something that's concerning you that's really, really very serious. Okay, Beth, you could click. So the flowers and the separators that you see here, one of the things that I've been doing to take care of myself is that I started buying plants. You could buy plants from Trader Joe's. You could buy plants from grocery outlet. And these plants are $5, $6, $7. And the ones that I've started to really love are succulents. And how I'm taking care of myself with that is that I'm naming the plants. And they all have a Black name to them, like Etta, James Etta, Rosetta. I have a gardenia plant that's called Garnetta. And those are just little things that I've created a little sanctuary for myself that I could go outside and sit and rest and relax. So that's a basil plant on the top there, but that pink part coming over the top is from a succulent. So some people thought that basil was growing that. No, that's just a little trick I did for pretty purposes. All right, so I'm going back here again. Okay, Beth, you can click and click again. Bring it all down. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go very slow here. And I want to invite you to take some deep cleansing breaths. A deep cleansing breath is when you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Out like that, because what that does is that reverberates in your chest around your heart area and brings oxygen in, and it calms you down. So talking about and witnessing systemic racism can make you feel some sort of way. It's all over the street, the news, and the world. And if this section makes you feel uncomfortable, good, because it's time that we pull the covers back and take a look at what's really going on. But some of the people are taking it a little bit further, and some people are getting hurt as a result. But take time to stay in the room. Please focus on your feet or touch your fingers like I showed you earlier so that you can locate yourself in the here and now. So racism-related experiences can range from frequent and ambiguous microaggressions to blatant hate crimes and physical assault. Racial microaggressions are subtle and yet pervasive acts of racism. These can be brief remarks to vague insults, or even nonverbal exchanges, such as a scowl or refusal to sit next to a person of color on the subway. When you experience these microaggressions, the target, that means the person that's experiencing it or the victim, loses vital mental resources trying to figure out the intention of the one committing the act. They lose the ability to be centered, and they become offended, and a lot of people become just righteously pissed off. These events may happen frequently, making it difficult to mentally manage the sheer volume of racial stressors. The unpredictability and anxiety-provoking nature of these events may be dismissed by others, and they could lead victims to feeling as if they're going crazy. Chronic fear of these experiences may lead to constant vigilance or even paranoia, which over the time may result in traumatization or contribute to PTSD when a more stressful event occurs later. And this is according to research done by a man named Carter in 2007. In fact, some of the research that I went through, one study of female veterans found that African Americans scored higher on measures of ideas of persecution and paranoia, which the author attributed to adaptive response to racism. While most of us can understand why a violent hate crime could be traumatizing, the traumatizing role of microaggressions can be difficult to comprehend, especially among those who do not experience them. Another study of racial discrimination and psychopathology across three United States ethnic minority groups found that African Americans experience significantly more instances of discrimination than either Asian or Hispanic Americans. Now, this was in 2012, before the leaders in the country started calling the virus China virus or Hong Kong flu. So that may be switching now. No research has been done on it, but I'm sure that some numbers are going to come up and make it a little bit higher for Asian and people of Latin descent, especially with all of the discrimination around immigrants. Non-Hispanic whites experience the least discrimination, 11% for whites versus 81% for blacks. Furthermore, those African Americans who experienced the racism were significantly more likely to experience symptoms of PTSD as well. So here's a story from one of the researchers. A little kind of funny story. Some of the research also showed that young Black men who drive cars have been targeted significantly by the police, and many of them have been shot and killed. So my grandson is 12 years old, and I drive a Cadillac. And so I told him earlier, he was probably 10 or 11. I said, you know, I'm going to get one more Cadillac before I go, and you're going to drive me around. And he says, oh, Nana, I can't drive. And I say, yeah, well, when you get 16 or 17, you're going to say, hey, Nana, can I get that car and take you to the store? I kind of know that's what's going to happen. But the research was showing how many young Black men get killed behind the wheel by the police and other instances of violence. And I called my son and I said, by the way, TJ, that's his name, he's never going to drive a car. And so that's me being, you know, having histrionics about and worrying about my grandson. I'm a Black mother, and I don't rest very well at night. My son is 6'8", and I have 2 Black grandsons. They're nice people, they're educated, they're kind, and educated, kind, nice Black men get killed. So I'm always hypervigilant, and I have a lot of hyperarousal around that. And I also watch one of my grandsons. He has a strong need to be right. I don't quite know where he gets that from. But he also wants to always have the last word. And now I'm watching my son try to help him, you know, shut that down a little bit. So that having to unlearn that behavior is really, really very difficult. So I've spoken to African Americans all over the country about their race-based stress and trauma. And there was one veteran who told me about how the bullets he faced in combat were nothing compared to the mistreatment he experienced at the hand of his fellow soldiers in arms. When he searched for treatment for his resulting mental health issues, the VA system could not find a qualified therapist to help him. I also recently assessed a woman for whom the racial climate at work became so oppressive that she was no longer able to function at her job. She tearfully described the ongoing racial harassment she experienced from her supervisor, while the coworkers turned a blind eye. She carried a stack of documents to prove everything that had happened to her because she didn't think anyone would believe it. My heart breaks because I have both heard and experienced this story in many forms more than one time. So once sensitized and going through racism, routine slights may take an increasingly greater toll on you. Microaggressions, such as being followed by security guards in a department store or seeing a white woman clutch her purse in the elevator when a Black man enters, is just another activation for racial distress. Social messages and stereotypes may blame the victim and tell us that Blacks need to stop dressing like thugs or get off welfare and assimilate into white culture to gain acceptance. But these experiences can happen to any Black person of any social status. Sometimes the higher the status, Black people experience more discrimination because they threaten the social order and thus draw increased hate from others. I've experienced it, and you probably have too in your life. I worked for the city and county of San Francisco, and being in the field and being a therapist and being a Black woman and being a Black woman who's an extrovert and being a Black woman who's an extrovert who has a very strong opinion, people have some kind of way or impression of that. I remember I had a supervisor who called an older Black man a boy, and I called him on it. And I went to the director in the department, who also was a white man, and they colluded against me. And so at that time, I was the program manager over the single adult shelters, and I held the director's meeting every month. And one of his microaggressions was that he told me that I could not come to my own director's meeting, that he would handle it. And so that's really, it's a microaggression because the answer that he gave was something like off the cuff. But it felt very aggressive to me, and I felt very helpless because he was the person who had the power and control over my life in terms of my career, in terms of my job, my evaluation, and all of that. I felt very helpless. I felt very angry, and I felt very confused. And I didn't feel like I had anybody to support me. And where I found support was in the coaches and the mentors that I had outside of work, that I could go to and talk about what was going on and get reaffirmed that what he thought about me was not really true or so. Okay, Beth, you could go to the next slide. So I don't know if you notice online, but there are Karens now, people, white women who think that they're privileged to call people of color out on things, and they're everywhere. They refuse to wear masks, you know, and they're questioning people that come to deliver the food from Instacart. One guy I saw, he even had on a UPS uniform, and she said, "What are you doing in my neighborhood?" So this bold and this abrasive way of being, of course, is being, you know, instigated by those who are in leadership and in power, but it's really very, very serious and very, very dangerous, because not everybody is just going to say, "I'm videotaping you," and walk away, right? Some people, you come at them that way, they go come back at you. And I did see a couple of women, you know, get hurt as a result of their behavior and their aggressive behavior. So findings from large-scale national studies indicate that while African Americans have a lower risk for many anxiety disorders, they have a 9% prevalence rate for PTSD compared to 6.8% in white people, according to a study in 2009. That means that almost 1 in 10 Black people becomes traumatized. And these rates probably may be actually higher, since diagnosticians are usually not considering the role of racism in causing trauma. Studies show that African Americans with PTSD experience significantly more impairment due to trauma, indicating greater difficulty carrying out daily activities and increased barriers to receiving effective treatment. Researchers also linked racism to a host of other problems, including serious psychological distress, physical health problems, depression, anxiety, binge drinking, and even disordered eating, according to a study by Williams in 2014. A strong positive African-American identity can be the potential protective factor against symptoms of anxiety and depression, but this is not adequate protection when the discriminatory events are severe, repetitive, and ongoing. Okay, Beth. So during the COVID-19 global pandemic, and the systemic ramifications are unprecedented, but harrowing, are not only unprecedented, but harrowing. We are all adjusting to new realities and grieving the loss of old ones. All of us are trying to just simply manage our daily lives, taking care of our children, or our parents, or dealing with financial stress, and just adjusting to this new way of life. All of the stressors related to COVID-19 may likely result in a myriad of negative feelings, such as depression and anxiety, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. This is collective trauma, and we are experiencing it, and we may feel bleak, but this is not the first crisis in our history. For example, research investigations in crises such as 9/11 and other episodes of pandemic viruses throughout the country, and we've always been able to come back stronger and more fortified. But this is very serious. So researchers have studied how the mentally strong may behave through these experiences. And this information may help you reduce the likelihood of mental health issues resulting from COVID-19. But we are all in this together. There's nobody that is not feeling something as a result of this pandemic. Mentally strong people and the mentally strong and resilient may eventually display most post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress syndrome. Post-traumatic growth is understood as the positive psychological changes that result from traumatic and highly stressful experiences. Although we're in the middle of this crisis, individuals can rise to a higher level of functioning when the pandemic ends. Most of us know the basics. It's vital to create daily habits, and to exercise, and to connect with our social supports using virtual meetings and social media. However, here are some suggestions based on evidence on how mentally strong people respond. We will go over some suggestions on how mentally strong people respond to the coronavirus. But what we're really talking about here is resilience. Now, some people who have experienced ancestral grief have resilience in their DNA. If your ancestors were enslaved or immigrated to this country due to trauma, or just living here with racialized trauma, you have resilience. In order to have resilience, you have to have gone through a traumatic event. And then you go through that traumatic event and you come out on the other side of it stronger. The resilience that I have learned and developed is because of what happened to me when I was working at the city and county of San Francisco, and how through looking at all of our critical incidents reports daily over and over and over again, connecting with the shelters, talking to the directors, connecting with the clients, I developed what I now understand as a practitioner is called conversion disorder. What that means is that I lost the strength in my arm and I couldn't lift one of my arms above my head. So in the United States, we have great pharmaceuticals, and I got some great drugs, and nobody was checking on me. And so my cognitive brain went offline, and my regulatory system took over. And there you don't have any feelings, you don't have any compassion. All you have is just a great feeling of doom and gloom and worry. And so I started to contemplate suicide. And as I was down there, I saw my son telling my grandchildren, Nana died. And I saw my best friend telling all 8 of her grandchildren, they called me sister baby, that sister baby died. I got up off the floor, I called Kaiser. I got a great doctor, she's still my doctor today. She got me into some critical tests, recognized that I had a pinched nerve. But my positive growth here is that I realized is that if that happened to me, and I'm clinically trained and educated and been working in the field a long time, what happens to those people who really don't understand what's going on in their body? So that's why I've created these trainings as a result of what happened to me, so that I can tell other people to be mindful of secondary traumatic stress, to be mindful of compassion fatigue, because it can take you out. But now we're going to watch a video on what is post-traumatic growth. It's only a little two-minute video. So if you could give your attention to that, that's going to play that for you.
Emerge from a tragedy at a higher level of happiness than they experienced before. Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky, a psychology professor and researcher, has studied this phenomenon known as post-traumatic growth. Sonia reveals why this happens, but not only that, she shares new perspectives on how to foster it.
So imagine that someone had a bad event, like whether it's a diagnosis or losing a job, losing a spouse. And for some people, they're like this in happiness, they go down and they never recover. And that's actually a pretty small subset. Other people, they go down in their happiness and then they go back up to the same level. And that's the majority. And so a lot of resilience research is on that. And that's literally what resilience is. You bounce back. So you bounce to the same level you were before. But what I think is the most fascinating are people who are kind of going down, and then when they come back up, they actually come to a higher level than they were before. And that's called post-traumatic growth. Not to say that we should all experience trauma so we could experience that, but if you have experienced it, some people just are able to, they grow, they appreciate their life more, they feel like life is so precious. I didn't really appreciate that before. They kind of live day to day. But, and what's interesting to me are the individual differences. What makes that person special that see it that way? And actually, my very, at the beginning, when I first started doing research on happiness, back when I was in grad school, my advisor back then, and he had this friend, talked about this. He had a friend who was a Holocaust survivor. Well, actually, 2 different people he knew who were Holocaust survivors. And he said, one of them said, it's indecent or obscene to ever be happy again after the Holocaust. Like after that happened, how can anyone be happy again? And the other person said, it's insane or indecent to be unhappy again. Like how can you not enjoy life regular life, after you've survived the concentration camp. So it's just, it kind of puts into this stark contrast, this very different perspective that some people have. Fortunately, most people have the more positive perspective. And they grow. And so anyway, that's what's most interesting to me about resilience. There's also some research that shows sort of how people can become more resilient. Laura King, who's at Missouri, she does research on meaning. And so she finds, for example, that, some people make this distinction between happiness and meaning. Like, you could be happy or you could have meaning. And I've always thought that they really go together. It feels good when you feel like you have meaning in your life. And so that's exactly what she finds. She actually did this really great study where she measured people throughout the day. And she asked people, how happy do you feel? And how much meaning do you feel right now? And on days that you felt happier, you felt you had more meaning. And on days you had more meaning, you felt happier. So they kind of cause each other. And lots of others. She also studies coping. And she finds, for example, getting back to coping, that when people experience negative events or like real major adversity, they not only they actually can become happier, they become more mature. And so she, for example, has studied women who have kids with Down syndrome. And sort of she studied their life stories and how they describe, when they first found out. And basically she finds that most of them have become kind of more mature through that experience, more kind of cognitively complex. It's like they think about life in a more complex way. She also looked at, so she looked at different groups, women who got divorced after many, many years. So older women who are divorced after like very long marriages, suddenly their identity has changed and how they've coped with that. And she also studied gays and lesbians who've come out and how, the hard parts of that. So anyway, so she finds that people not only get happier after some of these very difficult events, but they become more mature.
When major adversity hits, it can recalibrate a person's perspective in ways that they may never have imagined. But now I'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on helping a client grow after they've experienced a trauma?
Briana, someone had a comment in the chat about the post-traumatic growth is consistent with findings from trauma healing movement that suggests participating collectively in intentional work of advocacy, mutual support, et cetera, brings up resiliency, recovery, and joy. Thank you for that comment. I like that very much.
Me too. And that's how we created this healing circle. So we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get into the 5 stages of grief. But one of the recommendations that I took from that book is creating healing circles, allowing people to come together in a circle and just talk about what their injury is and what processes that they've used to be able to move over the chasm in their life. Okay, cool. So before the pandemic, those bulleted items were key common behaviors that signal stress. But today, I think many people have a little trouble with each of these. So please don't panic. All you want to do here is slow down, rest. This is key, very key here. This is a life-saving thing I'm getting ready to tell you. Drink half your body weight in water every day. Half your body weight in water. Find a good cleanse. Drink a cup of hot water before you put anything else in your body in the morning. Don't touch your phone for the first 30 minutes to 1 hour as you wake up. Put your phone in another room so that when you are transitioning out of sleep back into wake, that period, that little block of time right there is your most critical time. It's where you're most creative. You get your answers to any problems that you're seeking. You come up with solutions to situations, and you create in that space. But you stop that if, as soon as you wake up, you open your eyes, you don't say thank you, you don't think about the people and the opportunities that you get to be grateful for, you just pick up the phone and hit it, then you lose that window. So I want to invite you to try these things so that you could recognize that there's some need to identify and help, and there's some way to identify and help and deal with the stress. But these common behaviors here, the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are usual, but some people have a lot of these now, especially since we're in a pandemic. And obsessive compulsive behavior is not OCD. OCD is where you have repetitive behaviors, washing your hands, or going back to check the locks on the door, or making sure you did this and you go back and check 5, 6, 7 times. Obsessive compulsive behavior is when you're very, very organized, extremely organized. Like you organize all your panties by the same color, or all your blouses are hung in the closet by the same color. And if that is one of the things that you like doing and you enjoy doing that, you can make money off of that. There are people who will pay you to come in and do that for them. I am not one of those people who's organized like that. The closest that I got to organizing something like that was when I organized my towels in my closet by color, right? That was the closest that I got to anything like that. So just a little lightness there. Another thing that's important here, difficulty managing your emotions. And that means that you are overly tearful or easily irritated or overly aggressive in places where you're not normally overly aggressive. That means that there's some imbalance that's going on now. And if you already had high levels or had levels of anxiety, you know that your anxiety is going to be exacerbated. If you were already dealing with depression, that's going to also be exacerbated when you're in this particular situation as a pandemic. Not being able to focus. One of the things that I do when I'm not being able to focus, because the mind is meant to run all the time. And if you're anxious and you have all these various sundry of thoughts, and you're not able to concentrate. So what I do to satisfy my mind with that, I'm working on something that I've got a timeline or a deadline to be accomplished. I have a pad of paper. I have a pad of paper right there for me, so that I'm able to put those questions down. And I'm able to just satisfy that part of the brain. So I know that, oh, go and pay the bill, or go and talk to so-and-so. Before, if I'm not focused, then I'm just gonna stop what I'm doing and go do those things. But if you have a piece of paper right there, then that will satisfy that need. So what I want you to put in the chat is any other things that you do to satisfy your behaviors. What are some of the strong things that you do when you're feeling stressed and like that? Okay, Beth, you can go to the next one.
Okay, before we go though, I just want to, there's a comment someone made about sensitivity to violence. That it might, wondering if it's irresponsible to have that in there because of how well, the thing was, what's wrong with being sensitive to violence, I think is the question. So can you just talk a little bit about that, Briana?
I don't think there's a right or wrong to be sensitive to violence, especially what's going on right now. But because we're in a pandemic and because people are feeling all of the anxiety and the hypervigilance and the hyperarousal, then, you know, they just, and all of that you're watching on television, you know, we watched a man be murdered on TV, right? And so that's why we're having all this uproar, not just in this country or in Minneapolis, but in the whole entire world, because people are sick and tired of being sick and tired watching people hurt other people for no reason, just because of the color of their skin, or just because of their ethnic background, or just because.
Yeah, and then here we have some people giving some wonderful things they're talking about, the things that they're doing: walking, dancing, laughing with a friend, long showers, swimming, art, journalings, going to a quiet place and watching something funny like a movie or a show. Someone said sewing or arts and crafts. So there's some really wealth of things.
Great. You can get some plants and name them. That helps.
I like that.
Name them however you want. I'm gonna find me a Beth plant, a Beth and a Leah plant. I mean, you guys gotta get me. I need a Beth and a Leah plant.
All right.
So here we are. And so this part is fostering wellness, kind of goes along with what some people have been saying. So we know that times are challenging, and stress can take a toll on our physical health, emotional health. If we don't get sleep and nutrition and exercise, it can be difficult to cope. It's difficult to stay focused, and it's really, really difficult to think about how we could solve some problems. So there are a lot of different studies that talk about developing healthy wellness. and how that strengthens our bodies, and it helps with our resilience, and it reduces the impact of stress on our ability to cope. And some of these are some strategies that we could build our resilience in addition to the ones that you all said. So physical activity, regular physical activity is essential to overall health and resilience. Active people are less likely to be depressed or anxious. Exercise also improves our information processing, and it releases chemicals in our bodies like endorphins and dopamine that enhances our mood to be positive. You want to aim for 2.5 hours of physical activity each week. I am failing at that. Or 30 minutes most days of the week. The 30-minute segments can be broken up into increments throughout the day. 3 10-minute walks, for example. Or taking virtual fitness classes, going for a swim or a hike in nature. Recently I went, and I had never been to Lake Chabot, and I walked Lake Chabot with a friend, and it was fabulous. Another thing that's important here is your posture. Some studies show that shifting your posture can change your mood. So if you're feeling nervous or anxious, try striking a pose that expresses the opposite. Like putting your hands on your hips and holding your head high. Some people call this the power or the superhero pose. The superhero pose. Or I do it, I have both my arms stretched up, outstretched, and I just say, it's already all right. It's already all right. I know I'll be able to get through this. And I feel so much better and so much more empowered. And then these kind of poses, certain yoga poses, increase your confidence and well-being. And your overall well-being. Sleep. Adequate sleep increases mood stability and cognitive functions. When you get enough sleep, you're better able to process new information, avoid overreaction, and make better decisions. For optimal energy and functioning, the Centers for Disease Control recommends sleep, hold on to your chair, 7 to 9 hours a night. Yeah, 7 to 9 hours a night to mentally recharge mentally and physically. So I say you have to get at least no less than 6 hours a night of straight uninterrupted sleep. Because when that happens, then your organs are able to recycle, and your kidney is able to filter, and your liver is able to do, and all of your organs, they need downtime. But if you are consuming a lot of caffeine and you hitting it and eating heavy meals 3 hours before you go to sleep, you're going to have some really, really difficult dreams and bad sleep, and you could wake up in the middle of the night. I usually wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the morning. And I use that time to focus and think. And I've been doing it for so long that I know that that's the time my body says, okay, you've had enough rest. We can get up and hit it. And I go to bed at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I try not to watch any kind of funny movies. And I definitely don't watch news before I go to bed. But we're going to talk about that. Meditation and mindfulness. Research indicates that meditation and yoga practicing and mindfulness are effective in increasing your capacity to tolerate and change stress. You put your problems into perspective and you gain clarity to solve them. Try integrating 5 minutes of mindfulness or practice into your day, followed by a guided breathing exercise that you can find on YouTube. So in the resources that I sent you, one of the links is Dr. Deepak Chopra, and he has a soul revival meditation that's 45 minutes long, but it's done chunks so that you could stop it and do it however long you want to. So the first one is breathing, and the second one is gratitude, and then the third one is resentment. And then there are others, but those are the 3 that I do regularly on a consistent basis. I'm always getting in and thinking about my gratitude, but I also try to keep my mind clear of any resentment that I may find myself experiencing, where I think somebody trespassed against me. And I try to keep that side of my mind clear, because I understand that people only do the best they can based on their level of consciousness at the moment. And I think that most people are generally kind and helpful and forgiving and supportive and compassionate. Now, there are a few jerks out there, and I try to tend to stay away from people like that because they cause me to feel activated. But I know that what I put out comes pressed down, multiplied, and running over. Comes back to me. And it might not come back to me, it might come back to my grandchildren. So if I put out some anger and rage and resentment, that might come back on my grandchildren. So I would rather have them get kindness and a blessing than something ugly come back on them. I hope that makes sense. And finally, limit your intake of alcohol and drugs. While using substances may dull your uncomfortable emotions caused by stress, they will not help you manage your reactions. So if you could also in the chat write down your own ideas for increasing your physical wellness, that will be great that we could share. Okay, Beth.
All right, next slide.
So
these are things that you're talking about that are not easy given our circumstances. I just want to say that to some people.
True. This is true. Yes.
So everybody breathing and doing the best they can.
Exactly. Standing and trying to make it through. Because it's difficult, especially because everything is so predictable. It's difficult because California has now surpassed New York. New York is in a healing mode where California is not. And Alameda County is higher than any of the other counties, and right along with Contra Costa County. So it makes sense that people are feeling a lot of upset and anguish as a result of what's going on. Wash your hands, wear your mask, wipe your things down, disinfect your house, take care of your children, and physically distance, not social distance, physically distance. So because we've been here before. Is that the slide you're on, Beth?
I've been here before, absolutely.
Okay, so we do recover. 9/11, and you remember people say we want to go back to the way things were in the new, we got a new normal here. If you think about 9/11, the airports changed drastically. A lot of things changed after the result of 9/11. Countries that dealt with Ebola and SARS knew exactly what to do when this pandemic hit. It didn't hit us the way it hit Africa. Africa shut down with this pandemic hit just like that. Just like that. And now we're the country that cannot go to other countries. We're the country where people can't travel back and forth. They don't want us. And even states. If you go to New York, you have to have a 14-day, what do they call that? When you isolate yourself for 14 days. Because the way that they have dealt with the pandemic they followed directions, they were obedient. But we will recover. I'm positive about that. I'm not sure when, but we will. Okay, Beth? You have the cookies up there?
I sure do, and I'm very hungry now.
Right. So these are called blessing cookies. COVID cookies is what I was gonna call them, and they used to be called dope fiend cookies. And then I told my son about that. He said, no, you can't call them dope fiend cookies, we're gonna call them nookies. And I said, no, we're not calling them nookies either. But now they're called blessing cookies. And so as we transition and we take a look at the 10 things that mentally strong people do to navigate in times like these, you should have received this recipe, make them and share them. I cut down the sugar in the recipe and I put a cup of brown sugar and a half a cup of the white sugar. And then I put a tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice. So that's what makes them different than what I have made. Okay, you can go to the next one. So now we're going to take a look at 10 things that mentally strong people do. But before we do, we got some sayings there. And I have a lot of sayings, and they really help me in times like these, in times of distress. I just go back to them often, over and over again. And so the one that I love the most is, it's already all right. It's already all right. That helps me to focus on the solution rather than the fear. Because if you focus on the problem gets larger. If you focus on the solution gets larger. So another one of my sayings is that there is hope at the light. There is hope, and the light at the end of the tunnel is not necessarily a train. And Maya Angelou, who I love, she said, every cloud has a rainbow inside of it. And so this article here are a few ideas from this article came from Psychology Today to look at 10 things that strong people do. Okay, click, Beth. Now you're gonna click and the little things are gonna swirl all around. So the first thing needs to happen is that you limit your social media and your news exposure. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Walter Cronkite on the 6 o'clock news.
Oh, yes.
Yes, right? So we had Our News by Walter Cronkite. And then the news went off and the TV went off at 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. Remember that? And they would start playing the Star Spangled Banner and you get that little doo.
Yes, I remember that.
It was quite a long time ago. But now we have 24-hour news cycle. So research suggests that there are two main predictors in how well a person will respond in a crisis like a pandemic. The first is how vulnerable they are in their own life before the crisis. The second is how much news they consume during the crisis. Chronic news exposure can create vicarious trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. So for example, if you watched the murder of George Floyd, even for a little bit of time, you continually saw that picture of that man's knee on his neck and his hand in his pocket. But not even that bothered me as much as the look in his face of murdering another human being while the whole world watched that. And I stopped looking at it early because I know that I would continue to see that image over and over and over again, but I saw it anyway. So PTSD is not only you experience something that happens to you, it's also witnessing the trauma of another individual. So the media exposure and the 24/7 news cycle can activate fight or flight responses, which can lead to traumatic stress. For example, in a study that was conducted after 9/11 terrorist attacks, several hours of media exposure after 9/11 was associated with PTSD and new physical health issues 2 to 3 years later in the participants. In another study conducted during the Ebola outbreak in 2014, daily media exposure was associated with increased distress and poorer functioning over the long term compared to those who limited their news media intake. Mentally strong people limit their news exposure and choose reliable and responsible print media and limit exposure to distressful images that are shown on the news. So I want to invite you to try to take a news fast or a news cleanse, and definitely don't let it be the last thing that you watch at night, and definitely don't let it be the first thing that you watch in the morning, and choose the shows that are healthy and that when you feel yourself becoming activated, cut it off. Because if something critical happens, I guarantee you, somebody's gonna come and let you know. You don't have to sit there, because if you're sitting there and you're watching it, then you're in a fight, flight, or frozen mode. And you begin to disassociate. So Beth, after the little Twitter bird twirls around, then the next slide will come up, so. Do you see feelings yet?
Yep.
Yes, we got feelings.
Okay, cool.
Feelings. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so mentally strong people accept their feelings as normal. They know that feelings are right. Some feelings are right, some feelings are wrong, some feelings are just are, because it's a time for both personal and collective trauma. A resilient individual understands that feelings such as fear, anxiety, hopelessness, anger, and sadness are normal because the information is just too overwhelming to process at once. Feelings are also temporary. So stress is exacerbated by your senses, something you see, something you hear, something you smell, something you taste, something you feel. And if you are still feeling stress when the activation is removed from your feeling spectrum, then that's called anxiety. And that means that you're thinking about it, reflecting on it from the past, or thinking about it in the future. When that happens, just bring yourself back to the here and now by tapping the floor, looking at something in the room, touching your fingers together. So what we are experiencing now, according to the DSM-5, adjustment disorder with anxious or depressed mood is applied to any person experiencing symptoms that's had a major life event like a pandemic occur in the last 90 days. So you all are experiencing and feeling and have a diagnosis of adjustment disorder with anxious or depressed mood. We are adjusting to this situation. We're doing the best we can with what we have to work with, and our feelings are all over the place. Many of you had children in school or away at college, or you worked and you didn't have your husband or your spouse or your partner with you all the time. And now all these people are in your space 24/7. And you don't have a place or a space because you're homeschooling, or you have lost your job, or you don't have the ability to attend a funeral or see a loved one in a nursing home or otherwise. So all of these adjustments, how you respond to them, are within normal limits. Be mindful how you're being activated, and make sure that you have a resource spot in your body and a resource spot in your home. Carve out a space and say, look, I need this space during this time to do what I need to do. It's imperative that you have just a little corner of the world for just yourself. It's not selfish. It's being compromising. It's watching out for yourself. It's being self-caring. You're having empathy for yourself, which is something that super women with those red capes that we wear, or super fellas with those black capes that you wear, it's like, I ain't got time for that. But I think that's why the world shut down, because we kept saying, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys got put on a punishment when you were growing up, but my mother would put me on a punishment. And I say, but I didn't even do anything. She said, well, just go to your room for some of the things you did that I didn't catch you with. And so she knew I was always trying to be slick. So I think that that's what's happening, to slow the world down, because we were spinning out of control. And now we have to slow down and stop and just be. So take this time to rest, relax, and rejuvenate your mind, your body, and your spirit, so that the anxiety and the adjustment disorder that we're experiencing, it could be lowered some. It doesn't have to be totally, off the hinges. You can lower that by taking deep breaths, by doing some of the other things that we have noticed. Okay, Beth. Are you on? They carefully choose the leaders they follow.
Yep.
Mentally strong people follow leaders with people with leadership skills that have healthy and that are mentally healthy, according to Garfin 2020. And I know you guys can take this to the bus stop, so I'm not even going to say anything about what the elephant in the room is, but because I don't want to be too disrespectful. But it is suggested that provide the healthy leaderships provide and promote calm and rational action, and limit watching media and individuals who undermine public health efforts to combat COVID-19. It's both confusing and psychologically harmful to watch leaders who publicly argue, misstate the facts and the research. I find it very, very helpful to watch Governor Cuomo and our own Governor Newsom. They make facts, they state the facts, they listen to the people that can make good decisions, like medical trained, cogent people. Their information is evidence-based, and they report it in a calm and a thorough manner. And they encourage people to follow and be obedient. The Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization has lots of information of critical updates, and it's important that you check there. Choosing a reliable print media source one time per day is suggested. Okay.
Next.
Click again. Alternative facts should spin.
Yes, we got it. Oh, you wanted, okay. Woo, there it goes.
So mentally strong individuals are actually aware of when their emotions are getting the best of them. We all have three states of mind: an emotional mind, a rational mind, and a wise mind. Our emotional mind is where our emotion statements rule. Emotional statements rule. Fear-based statements rule. Unreasonable, irrational statements rule. And the rational mind is where facts and logic prevail. And our wise mind is kind of a blend between the two. So being emotional is a natural during times of crisis. We are in crisis. But consciously move into a rational mind by listening to facts and the logic can decrease unnecessary negative states. For example, if someone is catastrophizing, I'm going to catch COVID and I'm going to die. A rational mind approach would be to list the statistics and how and the prevalence of individuals. So in the beginning, they were saying you don't need to wear a mask. So I went to Colombia and coming back on the plane, we were not wearing masks. Then they changed their mind and said everybody needs to wear a mask, right? And then they said only old people were dying. And then they always said that more African-American people were dying than any other group because of their compromised immune system, poor health outcomes, and no medical insurance, and living in environments that were not conducive to healthy living and eating foods. Now, the other day, I read that a 9-year-old little girl with no symptoms, asymptomatic, suddenly got sick and died. And so I'm saying that you don't know who's symptomatic, you don't know who's asymptomatic. You have to do what's necessary in order to protect yourself and be protected from other people. All right. So pay attention to the facts. Okay. Toxic people. Letting go of toxic people. And some toxic people are a member of your family. So you could limit exposure to them by using email or text to communicate. You want to make sure that you make yourself a priority, that you, in order for you to feel safe, so that you're able to operate and help other people. But if you can surround yourself with people who are not telling the truth, or who are toxic, or who gossip, or who provoke you, if you come around somebody and when you come around that person, you automatically start to feel activated, then your vibration is telling you that that person you need to eliminate that person from your life. My mother called that feeding those kind of people with a long handle spoon. It's okay for you to back up from somebody. And if you find that a toxic person is in your life and you're the one that's calling them, just stop calling and see what happens. Mentally strong people understand that toxic people and behaviors limit their time with them. All of these behaviors listed is what's important here. Make yourself a priority. You might have to eliminate some folks whose vibration does not match your vibration. Some people come into your life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. So some of the seasons for toxic people might just be over. Only you can assess and determine that. Okay, Beth.
I like that little image. Here we go.
Okay, so this is meditation. So meditation is about, prayer is when you're talking to God. Meditation is when God's talking to you. So whatever your spirit is, your higher power, whatever that is, your intuition, that means that you're quiet and gives you an opportunity to go inside, to reflect. Meditation reduces your anxiety, reduces your stress, and it's been known to increase your attention span. The Deepak Chopra link that I sent you has 5 minutes of breathing. The first thing that it is, 5 minutes of breathing. You're just paying attention to your breath. Paying attention to your breath. And if you have a bathtub, I'm going to give you my secret weapon. Dr. Teal's bath bubbles, Epsom salt, and coconut oil. Run the bath, put a lot of bubbles in there, and the Epsom salt. This is a cup. The water is hot as you can stand it. And you're going to stay in the tub for no less than 30 minutes. Put a sign on the door, say, do not enter. Make sure you tell your tribe, I'm getting ready to take a healing bath. And when I come out, I'm going to be renewed and rejuvenated. So don't come in here. Don't knock on the door, please. I need this space. And when you come out, after you've listened to Deepak Chopra for that tape there, because that's 30 to 45 minutes, you will be able to see and sense yourself in a better way. And if you're not able to, that means you need to do it again, because it's a lot of stuff that needs to be erased inside of you. So do it until your well-being feels balanced, until you feel this state of calm. Okay?
Love that.
Self-care.
Here we go.
We talk about this, we talk about this, we talk about this. So what I want you to do is, you have already written some things of self-care into the chat box. If there's something that you do that makes you feel great and wonderful, do that. The one thing that I do every single day, because when I get out of the bed in the morning, I know I'm not getting back in the bed. I know it. So I go wash my face, brush my teeth, and I have my affirmations in the bathroom. And these affirmations, if you want to write this down, these are by Louise Hay. And the first one is, I begin now, today, to open myself to ever increasing prosperity. I begin now, today, to open myself to ever increasing prosperity. My income is constantly increasing. My income is constantly increasing. Now, income does not always mean just money. What are some of the things that you are being prosperous about? This is prosperous. You're gaining knowledge. You're gaining information on how to take care of yourself and those people that you work with and those people that you have chosen to serve. The next affirmation is, it's only a thought, and a thought can be changed. It's only a thought, and a thought can be changed. And then, of course, I gave you, it's already all right. But an affirmation begins with, I am, I can, I will, I do, I believe. I will, I can, I do, I believe, and I forgot the last one. Right? So you want to write those affirmations down and repeat them to yourself. And we're going to go over that in just a minute on how that self-talk is important. Okay, Beth, you click this twice. That little girl come up to your face there. I like her. So mentally strong people know themselves and what they need to do to feel supported. Those that are introverted focus on internal states of being and small gatherings versus external sources of stimulation. Introverts feel drained after heavy socializing and need to recharge their energy in solitude and quiet. Conversely, extroverts gain energy from other people and enjoy many social activities. Introverts realize that they may have a need to connect virtually using FaceTime, Zoom, or Skype, or Google Hangouts, but may do so in small groups and less often than extroverts. Here's the key though. Both personalities may have different needs to promote their well-being. There's nothing that's all good or all bad or all right or all wrong. You get to go inside, check into your resource spot, and know what works for you, what soothes you, what causes you to murmur, to just know that I'm okay. Murmur, that's Maya Angelou's favorite word, murmur, M-U-R-M-U-R. And so what that means, you're sitting there, you have your favorite cup of tea, you got your blanket wrapped around you, you got your good old house shoes on, and you're tucked all in, and all you could do is just feel like murmuring. I know y'all cracking up. I get carried away. Okay, click that 3 times. So here's another video. But mentally strong people pay attention to their thoughts. And I want to tell you that that's a gardenia. Her name is Garnetta, and she had a miscarriage. My first gardenia died. But there's another one there, so send her positive thoughts. So let's take a look at this little 3-minute video that can express that better than I can. You guys ready? Okay, so let's just take this a little bit deeper with reticular activation system, or RAS, and think about short-term relief, those behaviors that we use to cope or just get by. Something happens that make you feel anxious or depressed. There's a short-term relief that is our normal go-to. Whatever it is, it's not healthy. If it is not healthy, it's not healthy, but we tell ourselves that whatever we need to make it okay, it is. The work is to identify those activation elements that prompt you to take or do or behave in this way of coping. There was a word in the 70s called copaesthetic. Everything is copaesthetic. I still use that saying today. So a prompting event is something that happens that causes you to feel activated. I'll use an example from my life. Let's go back to those blessing cookies. I have a very expensive scale in my bathroom. I was morbidly obese once in my life, and recently, to avoid knee surgery, I released 50 pounds. I keep trying on my jeans because sweats just don't really tell the whole truth. So I was really missing getting dinner at my favorite sushi place with a friend. I can't just call her up and tell her to meet me at the restaurant. There also they've been shut down due to COVID-19, and I think about how much I missed that and how the staff is not working now. And I can't even get that sushi on DoorDash. So the event is exacerbated because the numbers are increasing in California due to COVID. We're testing more people, but people are not being obedient. So now I'm pissed. No sushi leads to the fear of people dying. So I think about how many people are hurt, and I worry about my family and my friends. My underlying belief is made better by the short-term relief, those cookies. I renamed them just to make it seem better. They still got the same sugar, the same butter, and the same effect on my hips. But the long-term consequences is that the people from the 600-pound show, if I keep doing what I'm doing, will soon be contacting me, or I'm gonna have to give them a call. So this is a model that you could use with folks to help them visually understand the trouble with short-term relief that leads to long-term consequences. Our thoughts are connected to our beliefs, as we saw in the reticular activation system. Many prompting events come from childhood trauma, but that's another training. All right. So finally, the 10th one is people who are mentally strong honor their grief. Click, Beth, twice. Do you see just what is grief there?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so these are examples of just what grief is. And you could read all those, but one of the things that's really important is that they're unique to each individual. They have a lot of symptoms, but what's important is that the grief must be dealt with. Because then if you don't deal with it, regardless of what the grief is, you'll start oozing it out all over somebody else, and it doesn't look very pretty. But we don't have what it takes to deal with our grief in this country because we always make it seem like it's something wrong with it. But there's nothing wrong with grieving. Okay, click. And we're gonna go into that a little bit more. That's 3 clicks, Beth. So this is the typical grief, 5 stages of grief. Every helping professional is associated with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so everybody understands that. Click twice. But what's important here is the impact from on your physical being, your mental being, your spiritual being, and your emotional being. And one of the pieces that's really important here is under the emotion, when you're grieving and you have blunted emotions. That means that you just don't feel the same way about situations that you used to feel joy with, right? That the things that used to brighten you up no longer cause you to feel brightened. You have a lot more anxiety and just a general feeling of nervousness in your body when you're thinking about the physical, lots of tension in your neck and your back. You know where you're at, your point. Those are like your activation points, actually. And then in the mental, your thoughts are jumbled, you're confused, you have difficulty concentrating, and you just have this sense of doom and gloom. So now we're going to take a real quick look at the difference between grief and depression. You there, Beth?
We are.
Okay, so I'm gonna go down grief real fast. So grief, there's something that's an identifiable loss. You can think about it and you lost that. It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a sushi restaurant, it could be a thing, it could be not being able to go see somebody that you normally would be able to go see. It could be when you lose your keys, or you lose your glasses, or God forbid you lose your iPhone 11. Right? Something tangible that you lose. The person's focus is on the loss. I can't find this, right? You have the fluctuating ability to feel pleasure. Pleasure goes up and down, in and out, but there's nothing constant there. Other people coming towards you, comforting you is usually helpful. You're able to feel a wide range of emotions. And then your self-esteem is usually preserved after the loss. You do get back to that sense of normal, like the woman talked about when she was talking about the growth. However, with depression, the specific loss may not be identified. You just feeling low, mighty low. I feel mighty, mighty low. And there's no reason that you could really hang your hat on. It's just a feeling, but you know that it's something inside of you. Your resource spot is not working. An example of that, when I was in Colombia and we were deciding to come back, and my bucket list trip was going to be over after all the thousands of dollars that I spent to get over there, I felt depressed. And I could hang my hat on that and have it be grief. I actually was grieving the loss of the trip, but the depression kind of took over and I was just extremely sad. And all of my little mechanisms that I give to people to help them feel better, they weren't working. And then you have a feeling of persistent isolation from others. You get sick and tired of being sick and tired. You just don't feel like being bothered. And then, but what's serious here is that that's the feeling of worthlessness and self-loathing become more common often than not. And then thoughts related to feeling of worthlessness and undeserving life are unable to cope with the pain. That is called complicated grief. And I mean, complicated depression. And that also, you also have complicated grief when grief lasts longer than a year. And depression at this state is major depressive disorder and it lasts 2 years or more. Okay, click. Now I want to talk to you. Keep clicking to drop all of those down. About
Francis Weller.
Francis Weller. So when they had the school shootings, all the school shootings over and over and over, I just couldn't take that in. But there was one shooting in Gilroy that knocked me off my socks. And it was a 6-year-old boy who went to a festival with his grandmother and he was murdered. That really socked me. So I couldn't stop crying. I had the grief and the depression. I was crying like, not the little cry, the big cry. And I just couldn't stop sobbing for this child that I didn't even know. And what I know, it was accumulation of all of these school shootings that impacted me like that. And so a friend of mine said, at least you're able to experience it. She told me to get this book that we were going to start doing some healing circles. So that's how I was able to move that grief into the positive growth. So we started doing these healing circles, and this is the book that I use for that. So in there, they have everything we lose, we love. So losing people, capabilities, and objects we love is our most obvious grief gate. These overt losses sometimes hit us square in the chest with a tangible blow that brings us to the floor. Other times we're protected by numbness and denial until the grief breaches our defenses. There's no right way to experience loss, but experience it we will, personally, viscerally, and profoundly. The second grief is places that I have not known love, sorry. This gate refers to the aspect of self we deny in order to fit into family and peer groups and the broader cultural systems. We can't grieve what we can't see. Some parts of ourselves are cloaked with shame, old shame, and held out of the view, remaining untouched by grief's handling wisdom. Grief is wisdom. It takes courage to experience your grief. The energy of a painful childhood fuels our adult compassion. The agony of oppression just gives us the will to create a more just society. This gate number 3 is very true now. The sorrow of the world, as Francis Weller puts it, we are born expecting a rich and sensuous relationship with the earth and communal rituals of celebration, grief, and healing that keeps us in connection with the sacred. Anyone brave enough to open their see that this world is suffering right now. Suffering lies in distant lands, in our neighborhoods, in our families, those we love, and even with those we ignore. in our clients' hearts and our patients' hearts. You have to go in and out of those rooms every day where people are in the hotel. They have been isolated. The world is shifting, and we are all grieving that right now. Gate number 4, what we expected and did not receive. For Weller, this gate has to do with the expectations coded into our physical and psychic lives. And the contrast of our contemporary life creates a type of deep, deep grief that Weller believes we seldom have the language for or the space to acknowledge. The unborn baby, the wilted relationship, the career not chosen, the opportunity just out of reach, all represents hopes that linger unrealized in our hearts. What might have happened, we wonder? Who would I be now? Unlike our ancestors who lived much like their ancestors, we live in a rapidly changing world. Basic unspoken assumptions about life shift under our feet and make us feel like we're raised in one culture and yet we live in another. And then finally, ancestral grief, the grief we carry in our bodies from the trials and tribulation of our lineages. An old adage says, what is not transformed is transmitted. We can be sure that our ancestors transmitted their grief to us. Some fled the old country. Some were enslaved. Others endured abuse or impoverishment. Some felt the stings of war or genocide or expulsion. Some closed their hearts and became the enslavers, the colonizers, or the exploiters. Whatever palette of suffering we've been painted with it all, we try to hide from it. We try to hide it from blame and anger and addiction and distraction. Many of us are working to shed light on our ancestors' unresolved grief. It's hard work that requires honesty and love, and it opens our heart to the astounding array of grief within those we care for and allows us to be present with fewer defenses. So I really recommend that you get this book, and it also is on Audible. You could get it in an audio book. Click, Beth. 1, 2, 2 times. So here, you there?
Yes, got it.
Such a great clicker. So here are a few tips to help when others are in trouble. The first thing is assess. Do you have a plan, the means, and a method? And then you want to listen non-judgmentally. Most people just want to be heard. Anytime I ask the person, do you want to be heard or do you want me to give you some advice? Most people say they just want to be heard. Giving reassuring information when I'm listening. Encourage appropriate professional help if necessary, and encourage self-help and other self-support strategies. Always looking out, taking care of yourself could be overwhelming when you're taking care of yourself and several others. So you want to give yourself permission to just step back and take a look at your own first aid action plan and where are you in 5 of these elements. And then finally, this is a tool that you use to be listening, to be a better listener, practicing co-regulation skills and pearls. Pearls is partnership, empathy, apology, respect, legitimation, and support. So you're not giving them stories and you're not giving them examples of what they should have, could have, would have done. You're just listening non-judgmentally. And then these are some, click again, Beth. These are some things that to avoid. You can see that. Touching the person, of course, now we're not really touching people at all. Maintaining direct and continuous eye contact. You want to avoid doing that. And if somebody is talking to you, but they're looking up and away, they're actually accessing their neocortex. I'm also a brain spotting technician. And so when people are looking up and away, they're trying to access a place where the answer lies in their brain. They may not even be realizing that where they look up and away all the time is where they go to access the answers, right? Crowding or cornering a person and talking to others as if the person is deaf, or assuming that a person who does not respond cannot hear you. Somebody may just be listening to you. So I always say, does that make sense? Tell me what you think you heard me say. Okay, click. And then is these places when you should make the referrals here. And then these are a few resources for Alameda County, but asking for help is a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. Most mental health practitioners are providing services via Zoom or other mediums. If you need to find a therapist, try a directory like Psychology Today or find a therapist or better help. All of these are all online, and therapy is now being done online successfully via several different mediums. You can also look at mental health websites such as the Anxiety and Depression Association of America or the American Psychiatric Association that could provide factual and accurate information. And then you have here the resources that I've been talking about. And then we're gonna watch one more little quick video. Okay, you guys?
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's, you know, it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, you know, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director? Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Okay, here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
All right, so I call people who do the work that you do warriors. I used to say wounded warriors, but I think that we're warrior healing people. And you're drawn to this work because it's an assignment. And I think that we take it very, very seriously, especially in these days and times as essential workers and essential worker supervisors. And it's really very important that you do more than just do regular self-care, because it is a requirement that you remain standing. But it's also important that A, you make those cookies and you share them with people and don't eat them by yourself. And B, you let other people know that how they feel about you and that they matter to you as well. Thank you so much for your participation. If you could take a moment to put your last thoughts in the chat box, if you got a minute, that would be great. And one thing that you heard me say in this training, I would appreciate it if you could put that in the chat box. Just one little thing that you learned today. And thanks for your time and attention. And may grace walk before you and surround you and protect every step that you take.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And appreciate everyone for being here, Briana. You're just amazing. And I just want to, we look forward to having you back again with us because of the inspiration and the love that comes right through from you. So, and everybody, thanks for being here. Please fill out your evaluation. We'll be sending you an evaluation to fill out. And also 3 months from now, we're going to be sending you another evaluation that's going to ask you, how much of this have you put into practice? What kinds of things that you learned today, that you're committing to today, to do self-care, will you be doing? Will you be naming your plans? Let me know if you'll be doing that. Will you be taking time to do a little meditation, which someone asked about what meditation is, and I think that might be something for us to do another little training about at some point. If you have things like that that you're interested in, please complete that in your evaluation. Will you be doing your daily affirmations? So people are saying, Briana, thank you so much. It was amazing. Thanks for sharing your strength and your wisdom, very inspiring. And you will have access to a certificate when you fill out your evaluation. People are just saying a lot of wonderful things about you.
I'm looking at the chat.
Can you see? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. That's the best part of all of it. Just
yeah, if you've got your screen on, just, clap your hands or put your hands together, wave your fingers up there, and we'll just give a big welcome to Briana and a thank you. And everybody, thank you so much. Hands up, hands up. Yoo-hoo. Yes, thank you for your participation. Yeah, we love it. We love it. It's really been an awesome thing. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. We have more trainings coming up, and if you've got this one, you're going to get more of our announcements. So again, evaluation. Have a great weekend. Happy Friday, everybody. Take care.